What's up, Sharks? This is Mr. O, your fabulous science teacher. That's my opinion, so I'm going to stick with that. We are moving on to our next unit, soil, which is directly related to our last unit of layers and plates. It's a little bit different, but they do relate, and we'll talk about how they do as we go. Remember, as we do flip notes, you can pause. Remember, I talk fast. I'm trying to get these videos under 15 minutes, unless YouTube says it's too big, I can't send it to them. So I'm going to talk fast. You can pause it. You can go and read and listen through it again. Make sure you listen to the end. We're going to start with soil, and we're kind of going to do a modified definition. I'm going to focus on how soil is made. Remember, soil is not dirt. Dirt is a younger kid's term. It's what I use to say when my kids playing in the dirt. But with soil, we're going to look at what is covering the earth on the continental crust. Then remember what we learned about plates in the continental crust. Soil will be what is on top of them. It is formed as rock is broken down by weathering. Weathering is a really big category, and we'll get more into that. And it mixes with minerals and other stuff, and I use the word stuff vaguely, on the Earth's surface. But this other stuff will be the next thing that you're looking at in your notes where it says soil ingredients. So let's move on to that. There are 5 main soil ingredients. We're going to talk about how all soils around the world are different and how all soils around the world are same. And their similarities and differences lie in the same categories. And the first one of those would be soil ingredients. The 5 soil ingredients, the first one is weathered rock particles. This is the main ingredient. Please make note in your notes that this is the main ingredient. That's why I put it all in caps. The second one is water. No explanation needed there. Third one is air. No explanation needed there. Fourth one is minerals, and rocks and minerals go together. And the fifth one is organic matter, also known as humus. Do not confuse it with its very similarly spelled hummus, which is with 2 M's. That's what you eat with pita chips, and I know it's delicious, but this organic matter in soil is not something you want to eat with pita chips. This would be like the leaves and twigs and dead animals and broken down parts of things and feces. So this is not the organic matter that you're looking to shop at Whole Foods for. So when I said about all soils in the world are similar and different, all soils have these same ingredients. From here to China, any kind of soil you'll find, only these 5 ingredients will be there. The difference will be how much of each of those things are in those soils. So we'll talk more about that as we get further into this unit. That word composition is back. We're going to see that in almost every unit that we learn about. So composition means what something's made of. What soil is made of will determine 3 big things. Those 3 things, as you're going to write these in your notes, the first one is what you can grow in it. Meaning, can you grow crops there? Can big trees grow there? Can shrubs grow there? Can plants not grow there? It depends on the composition. What you can build on it. Meaning, can you build big skyscrapers and cities, or can you only build little 1-story huts or teepees? Don't think about the desert where you say there's cities in the desert. That's because they're built on concrete, but we're looking at soil just by itself. And the third one is what happens when rainwater falls on it. Meaning when it's pouring rain outside, does that water go right through that soil? Does the soil hold it? Its composition determines that. So as we build further into this unit, 3 of the guiding things we're going to look at about composition are these 3 things. So we'll talk more about those in class. Factors are things that affect soil, meaning influences that will control if soil is developed well, meaning that there's good soil there, that means there's a lot of plants, or if soil is not developed well, meaning there's not a lot of plant and animal life there. There'll be 6 things that will cause the soil to either be healthy or not healthy or good or bad. The first one is the kind of rock there. There's 3 kinds of rock: metamorphic, sedimentary, and igneous. Different rocks have different minerals in them. They weather differently. Different plants can grow with different types of rock. So the kind of rock will be a factor about soil. Lack of rock could also be a factor. Climate. If you don't know the difference between climate and weather, climate is weather over a long period of time. Weather by itself is just what's happening outside today or this week. So climate is a huge factor, and we're going to talk more about climate and landforms actually in a separate set of flip notes for this unit. This one actually will have 2 flip notes, and the second one will focus on these things. Landforms, the things you learned about in 5th grade, you probably never want to learn about them again because all those flip cards that you made But landforms affect soil in a positive or negative way, like mountains negatively affect soil. We'll talk more about that later. Fourth one is plants. And plants can be in abundance or a lack of plants, meaning there's too many or not so many. So that could help or hurt soil. Animals and other living things, just like plants, there can be an abundance of them, meaning there's too many, which is good, or there's not that many, which could be bad. And we're going to talk about how those factors would affect soil in the area. And the last one is time. And when I talk about time, I'm telling you how much time the soil actually has time to develop. If you think about Antarctica, where it's frozen over all the time, that soil's never having time to develop, meaning it has very poor soil compared to soil like in the rainforest or around here. So we'll talk more about these factors as we go. Next thing in your notes, we're going to focus on the living things that affect soil. I generalize this into plants, microorganisms, and animals. You can see in your chart. In your chart, the things I put in all caps are the super important parts, but the things I put below it are how the super important parts got there, meaning plants provide organic matter. Remember that humus that I was talking about earlier? That is, a lot of it comes from plants. When plants lose their leaves or they die and decompose, that provides organic matter for the soil, which is a good thing. If there's plants there. If there's not plants there, soil doesn't have this effect on it. Microorganisms, these are the decomposers you learned about in food chains. They provide nutrients, which is plant food. Plants love nutrients. This is why your mom or dad or whoever feeds Miracle-Gro to their plants, because they want to give it nutrients to grow with. That comes from dead plants and animals, meaning these microorganisms eat dead plants and animals. They eat these dead things and they poop out nutrients. Sounds disgusting, but be thankful that they're around. This world would be a much scarier place without them. There's animals that add air and possibly water, and that's in all caps. That's the most important thing. Animals like to dig and mix through soil, and for example, worms are wonderful. So you ever want to be a gardener and you want to learn how to grow your plants larger, put some worms in the soil. They will allow for air and water to get in to make your plants healthier. And if you can look at all three of these things and all the things in caps, these are all things that are directly related to the ingredients of soil. Hence is why they affect it in either a positive or negative way. Let's move on to the next part. Soil horizon. I believe this is the most confusing, but the not most confusing part of soil. You're going to define it first. Soil develops in layers, and each layer is unique. They develop in horizontal layers. Horizontal is left to right, not up and down. And when we look at soil horizons, there is 5 of them. 3 of them are actually soil horizons. The other 2 are just part of the soil horizon chart. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But if you look at O, you stand on O, and then as you look, if you dig down in a hole, you get to A, B, C, and R. This is another thing I was telling you about how all soils are alike and different. Soil horizons, all soils have them, just a matter of how big, little, and sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not. We'll talk more about that later. Remember, you can pause this so you can fill in your chart, but please listen through how I describe the things. It will help you understand better. The O layer is on top, not just because Mr. O is the best, but on the top layer is the organic layer, meaning leaves, twigs. And the second part, it's not an actual soil layer, meaning this is just food for the top layer of soil. So O is not actually a soil horizon. And actually some soils don't have an O. So that makes O unique because all soils have an A, B, and C. Not everyone has an O. The first actual soil layer is actually A. It's the top soil layer because it's the top of the soils. This is what your people would go and buy if they wanted to have gardens. This is what you buy in stores. It contains the most humus with mineral particles, which is plant food. Nutrients is mineral particles as well. And it's the darkest. It's almost black. And this is great for plants, especially for crops. North Carolina has a wonderful A horizon running through it. This is why we're known as the tobacco state. We're able to grow crops because our A horizon is very large. The next layer down is B. There's very little organic material in B. It's all in A, meaning the plants are taken in A. So the leftovers go to B. It's kind of like a hand-me-down when you're brothers and sisters and you're wearing their clothes and you get the leftovers. This layer is mostly filled with clay and minerals washed down from A, and the color is a brownish to reddish color. North Carolina has unique red clay to it. We'll talk more about that in class. And the last of the soil layers is C. That's the deepest layer of soil. That's the key part there. It contains the largest and least weathered rock particles. If you think about it, all the weathering happens up near O, so rain and acid rain and all those other such things are not happening way down in the ground. So these big chunks of rock are down there. And the color is light brown to yellow in color. So you can make the assumption that the darker the soil, the better it is for plants. The lighter the soil, the worse it is for plants. And that's actually a true statement. And then the last layer is R, which is the layer of bedrock, which is the start of the tectonic plates. This is why you learn about plates before you learn about soil, because soil sits on top of the continental plates. And just like O, R is not an actual layer of soil. We'll talk more about the horizons when we get to class. We'll actually draw them and describe them better for you. The last thing we're going to talk about are soil properties. By definition, a physical property is things used to describe, classify, and organize. I know it's a horrible science definition, but it's the best definition I could think of to make it applicable to you. Meaning, if I asked you to describe your family member to me, you'd use all these things like they're tall, they're short, the color of their hair, what they're wearing, what they like. Those are properties that you're using to describe them with. We use the same things for soil, just get a little bit more technical. So in your chart, you're looking at 5 things: texture, fertility, pore space, chemistry, and water retention. Obviously, color is a property as well, but I always call it a kindergarten property, so we're going to stick with 6th grade properties. So texture is how it feels in your hands. So it's determined by the size of the weathered rock particles, meaning if the rock is nice and weathered and smooth and small, the soil is actually going to feel smooth in your hands. But if the weathered rock particles are not weathered that much, they're going to be big and chunky, and it's actually going to be rough. So that would be texture. Fertility is the ability for plants to grow there and how much nutrients in the soil. Those two things are related. If there's a lot of nutrients in the soil, plants will have a high fertility rate, meaning they will be able to grow there well. If there's not a lot of nutrients in the soil, plants will not be able to grow there well, and they'll have low fertility. Next one down is pore space. It's the space in between soil particles. To put in context, sand has really large pore space and clay has really small pore space. So pore space is something we'll talk more about. This would be an easy lab, and you're going to see pretty well what pore space is. Chemistry is the pH level of the soil, meaning is there high acidity or high basicness to it. We'll talk more about that. This is directly related to something you probably know already about rain, with the acid rain and stuff like that. And certain rocks give off different chemistries, and we'll talk more about that in class. And the last one is water retention. I think this is the easiest one, because if you understand the word retention means to hold on to, and then water with that would be the ability to hold water, meaning if you're standing on the beach and the tide runs up and the tide runs back, and 2 seconds later the beach is almost dry because the water ran right through it. But however, if it rains in your front yard and then a couple hours later you run through your front yard, you can still be muddy because the water is still in the soil. And water retention and pore space are directly connected. And we'll talk more about that in class. At the bottom of your notes, I'd like you to write that you listen to the end of this notes, meaning you listen to me thoroughly and all the way through. Remember to write down any questions that you had. I just wanted you to have them meet. I understand this is a lot of content without a lot of pictures. That's what we'll do in class when you get back. So thank you for listening to Shark's Notes Soil, flipped number 3. You guys are awesome. I'll see you when you get back to class.